Please pause for the key concepts and vocab coming up. So every video explaining how to evaluate trig functions had the unit circle, so I have the unit circle. Here are some inverse sine problems. So for the first problem, inverse sine 1/2, if you take a look at the unit circle, since inverse sine is negative 90 is less than, the angle is less than 90 degrees, if you look over here, it's 1/2, and since it's 30 degrees, it would be pi over 6, which is the answer we have right here. For inverse sine negative root 2 over 2, if you look at the unit circle, you would think it would be 7 pi over 4 down here, but since inverse sine needs an answer between pi over 2 and negative pi over 2, it would have to be the inverse of pi over 4, which would be negative pi over 4. For the inverse cosine problems, we have inverse cosine 0 equals and inverse cosine root 3 over 2 equals. For inverse cosine 0, it would be pi over 2, because according to the unit circle, if you take a look, 0 is pi over 2, and inverse cosine is up the top portion of the circle. So, and then we have inverse cosine root 3 over 2 is pi over 6, because again, if you take a look, we have root 3 over 2, which would be pi over 6, and again, it's on the top portion of the circle. And now the problems for the inverse tangents is inverse tan 1 and inverse tan negative 1. For inverse tan 1, it equals pi over 4, because since on the unit circle, root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2, since they're the same, they would equal 1, and if you look, that would be pi over 4. And if you look down here, you would think that inverse tan negative 1 would be 7 pi over 4, since it's also the same, but since inverse tan 1 is pi over 4, you need to stick with the rule and do the inverse of that, so it would have to be negative pi over 4.